let's get started for today. And nice to be here with you today. We're going to talk about some of the practices of Vedic practice of Agnihotra and a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita. So let's just take a moment and close your eyes. Come into the center of your head and take some relaxing deep breaths. And just have a sense of collecting up all of your energy where you may have left it today. You've been out and about already, and just let all your energy come right into the present. And then when you're ready, you can just open the eyes. And when you open your eyes, you do it gently, so that it's a soft message to your nervous system rather than a jolt. Okay. So Agnihotra it's a purifying, it's fire. It's a Vedic fire ceremony, and it was brought back into practice in the 1940s by a great yogi named Sri Gajanan Maharaj.
Sorry, Myra, but is the Facebook Live running as well?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay, we'll keep going. All right. And so Agnihotra is one of the most powerful practices that you can do that brings healing to your environment, and to everyone who lives in it. You know, at Pule, we've practiced it for many years now. We practice at sunrise and sunset each day. So we do that also to purify the land so that we can ensure that there's an abundant harvest from the garden. And we garden, of course, organically. And it brings also healing to the atmosphere. And with some additional practices, then you can bring a great deal of healing to the land and areas around you. So in other words, not just your own home. But Agnihotra is considered a yajna, which means it's an offering. You could say it's a surrender. You know, so we're offering up the illusion of control and self-will, you might say, and allowing ourselves to be in the flow of the natural rhythms of nature, sunrise and sunset. So anyone can do Agnihotra and be part of healing themselves and healing all of us and the planet. And I've seen little children under the age of 5 doing Agnihotra. So yeah, it's not complicated at all, but it's very specific in order to have the best effect. So it's performed in a small copper pyramid that has very specific dimensions. And we use copper tools because the copper material is a conductor of energy. And so then how does it work? Well, every day the sun brings or is removing, and sunrise bringing and removing at sunset, energy, light, and warmth. And it creates an environment that's conducive to a change that can clean up pollution of all sorts. So that could be environmental pollution. One of the reasons it came about at the time it did in the early part of the 20th century, or the middle of the 20th century, was because it's a very good protection against radiation. And it also brings a calm onto the physical plane. So this is for our minds as well as for the atmosphere. So the pyramid then is a generator by its shape and because of its copper material. And you might say that the fire then is a turbine, or what creates the transformation. And then we use cow dung and ghee and rice as the offering. So when those things come together, the dung, the ghee, and the rice, they form a composition, or they come together, they burn and it becomes an ash. And so that burning, the smoke, and the ash are all part of what neutralizes and nourishes the environment and us. And so the ash is used internally and externally in a medicinal manner. And when it's combined with other organic substances, such that you might use in gardening and farming, then it provides a charge to the nutrients that can support the plants. So we get improved survival, we get better yields and better propagation. So that's how Agnihotra, the fire, physically heals the atmosphere. And so it basically does the same thing for us, since we're a part of nature, rather than being separate from it. I can say that my personal experience, and I've heard other people say this too, is that in terms of our inner world, it helps us to access our heart. It brings more love into our lives. It makes it easier to be loving. So at morning Agnihotra, all of the energies, the seen and the unseen, so the ethers, they're all attracted to the pyramid. The birds will start singing and they'll come close. When you start practicing Agnihotra, animals will come. And then there's always the wind will pick up just a little bit as that shift of energy is happening at both sunrise and sunset. And so at sunset, then the energies are thrust out in the same way. So the flood of energies at sunrise creates a very strong purifying effect on all levels of life on the planet. We noticed, remember when I started, that we noticed a difference in the insects, that there was a greater balance of insects rather than just having one that was always there. And so we use a very specific Sanskrit mantra that engages those subtle energies. And so when you perform Agnihotra in that manner, then there's a channel that's created that purifies the atmosphere and everything nearby, as I said. So it's a large energy that's created at the moment of the mantra. And that's what neutralizes negativity and makes that support, that opening for a more positive energy. And as I said, I found that particularly in our minds. So by doing it regularly, then there's a positive energy pattern that's created in the home, for example, and in the atmosphere. So, in the past, sunrise and sunset, it determined our way of living, right? Because, before electricity, then we had to go to bed, we had to calm down. But this cycle of sunrise and sunset is really what best supports our nature. So no matter where you are or what you're doing, you could just begin to acknowledge the sunrise and sunset and see how that feels, because it's something that will be helpful to you and helpful in keeping the mind calm. And I think you'll really like the results. So if doing the practice of Agnihotra doesn't seem reasonable, then just start with acknowledging the time. There's an app called Agnihotra Buddy that will give you the precise timings in that. So fire is one of the 5 primary elements that's present in nature and in us. And so making an offering into the fire reminds us of the ongoing transformation that's taking place in life, in all of life, and in us. We eat, and then we burn it, and then we transform it, hopefully into good quality body tissue. And then we release the mala or the waste product. It's always this process going on with us and with everything in nature. So we do a lot of things to heal the body and heal the mind these days. Ayurveda and yoga offer us great tools for this. And a client asked me last week, she said, I hear you mention healing the body, mind, and spirit. And so how do I heal my spirit? And I thought that was a great question, and from a very innocent and sincere place. And so many of us don't think about that, or, it may be brand new to relate to yourself in that way. So the practices of Ayurveda are meant to do that. We have all these other reasons that we might do things, but all of them ought to be taking us in the direction of a harmonized relationship between all aspects of ourselves that will then result in harmony on the outside in our lives. So, for example, having a divine dinacharya, having a daily routine to take care of your body and your mind is most effective when it's done with an attitude of reverence, of respect for all parts of ourselves. And that's when we start to touch ourselves truly as spirit. And so this is what I'm talking about when I say we're holistic beings, that everything affects everything else. So if I'm having negative thoughts, it's going to have a negative effect on my body. So when we acknowledge our spirit by just saying hello to our eternal self, this is a start. This makes a big difference. A lot of times in life, another person that we might be around, they're just looking for a spiritual hello. And the stillness and the silence that we can discover in meditation is something that really enhances our relationship to ourselves. Most people in the beginning, they think of meditation, oh, I'm going to sit down so I can calm my mind down, so it feels better. But there's so much more to it. And we need not get caught up too much with goals, but we can experience this stillness and silence within. And this is when we come into alignment with our true self, with our spiritual nature. So, for example, when we give clients herbs, Ayurvedic herbs for healing and supporting their coming into balance. So we ask them to say a prayer or a mantra or something that helps them to connect inside, to open up the energies so that their mind and their cells of the body relax, and that allows the intelligence of the plants to stimulate and support the healing process. Yeah, so if I'm taking something and I'm, my face is all scrunched up and I'm like, I don't want to take this, or I'm not really sure it's working, or any of that kind of thing going on, it's probably not going to. So having a reverent gesture acknowledges all parts of us, and that's what will bring true healing. In other words, we're saying hello to ourselves as spirit. So it's about the relationship with ourselves and with the God of our heart. And Agnihotra is something that also does this very well. But do you see, if you think about it, what I've been saying, how everything we do in life could possibly have this effect? All of our thoughts, our speech, and our actions can either enhance our sense of ourselves as spirit, or it'll create separation. Yeah. And so that feeling of separation has us make poor choices, and that deteriorates our health in so many ways. And so there's a Sanskrit term, prajnaparada, which literally means a crime against wisdom, or crimes against nature, our nature. And this is where the Bhagavad Gita is such an incredible tool. There are many, many deep life lessons presented in the Bhagavad Gita, and I'm just going to mention a couple for you to think about and how it relates to the practices for you. So in the Gita, we're asked to look at our true motives for our actions. When we look at what we choose in life, whether it's our thoughts, our words, or our actions, there's always a motive. It may be obvious and it might not. So we may have a motive that's on the surface that we tell ourselves, And then we may have an underlying motive as well. When we don't get the results that we desired, it's often because we have some underlying motive that we really aren't even aware of ourselves. So, for example, someone might say to themselves that they want to stop overeating or binging, but deep inside, they're angry at themselves for not preparing a proper meal, or they're angry that they don't have somebody to prepare that meal for them. And, they may not have been providing themselves with nourishing and cooked meals, we'll say. And so when an opportunity to overeat comes about, there's snacks sitting around, or you're at a social event and you really want to check out. Those are opportunities to take to be controlled by that underlying motive, and it really has to do with trust. That we don't really quite trust that part of ourselves, and with good reason, because there is that underlying motive. So, we teach our inner child, or that innermost part of us, to trust based on what we do each day, and not maybe what we promise. Or we might say, oh, I'm going to make a decision. And I often talk to people about, oh, you need to make an internal decision about this. Yeah, but that internal decision needs to involve that inner child, for example. So that 6-year-old part of us that may have made some decisions about things that are still affecting us. So there's so many decisions that we make that are due to spiritual disconnection rather than really living in our truth. And so the Gita reminds us that we need to do things that help us come back to our truth. So learning to be truly honest with ourselves is a process of self-discovery. And in the Gita, it talks about the mahagunas of tamas, rajas, and sattva. Tamas being the darkness of life, things that are dead or dull or negative. Rajas being the activity of life, which can cause disturbance and increase tamas, or can take us towards sattva, or balance and harmony and the light of our consciousness, to increase our consciousness. So it's the amount of each of these energies in our mind and body, or our minds and bodies, that can change depending on how much of each of those things we're consuming. So it can be consuming in food, it can be consuming through any of the 5 senses, right? It could be watching tamasic movies, or watching violence, for example. So you do things that, eating food that has preservatives in it that's junky, and watching violent movies is going to create more tamas in my mind, right? And in my body. And so, when I do that, then I'm going to have less self-awareness. Yeah, and so if you eat strong, stimulating food like garlic and onions and chilies and fermented foods or alcohol, you get more rajas in your mind and your body, meaning more activity, but also more agitation in the mind. And those are all things that lead you more toward tamas than they do sattva. So they increase our sense of separation from our true self. In other words, that spiritual disconnection. So if we look at our activities, and I lay on the couch and drink beer, tamas, or I regularly expose myself to loud sounds, whether it's music or a sports event, rajas, then how is our mind going to be? It's just cause and effect. And how is my nervous system going to be? Maybe a bit agitated or shutting down from the overstimulation. Then it's easy to make poor choices. It's sort of like being in a cloud. And that's the prajnaparada. It becomes a mistake of the intellect. many of us who've been on the planet for a while, we can look back and say, whew, yeah, I was during that time frame, I was making some decisions that I sure wouldn't do today. Yeah, and that's part of the human experience. But once you have this information and understanding of yourself, that's when we really need to turn toward ourselves, because that's when we're going to feel the best. And it's really a lot more fun. So consider this, that when your mind is agitated or it's dull, are you likely to be willing to be honest with yourself about your motives for your behavior? No, it can get pretty hard to get there, and that's sometimes when we need to get some help. And most of us are not going to be able to do that. And so then, are you willing, and this is a question that we ask ourselves, yes, that am I willing to consider divine will over my self-will? In other words, I want, but sometimes what I want, there's something much, much better. And this is another thing that the Gita talks about, that when we allow ourselves to have that connection, that spiritual connection, when we allow ourselves to come into the rhythm of nature, you could say, which is the rhythm of our true nature, then we come into divine will. And so many of us might not be aware of ourselves at the depth that I'm talking about. But as we do things, little things, to increase the sattva in our lives, including balancing doshas and taking care of Agni, then we develop a greater inner transparency. We can actually enjoy the process of self-discovery. It doesn't have to be some negative, difficult thing. We can actually shave off the edges of our ego and that self-will and have a good laugh at ourselves. And with that, we become more of our true selves. So the little things that you can do for yourself in your dinacharya do make a difference. It's a gesture. It's just like somebody asked me the other day, they said, I'd really like to have a blessing for my birthday. And I thought that was fabulous. Our birthday is really one of it's what a great thing to celebrate our coming on the planet. It's really about saying hello to ourselves in our lives. So everything matters because we are holistic beings, and everything affects everything else. So, taking a few moments in the morning to gargle some warm water, having a stroll after a meal around some trees and appreciate nature whenever you can, abhyanga with some nice warm healing oil, or just simply being aware and enjoying a simple interaction with someone, anyone, cherishing just a moment. Wasn't that a sweet moment? All of our thoughts and words and actions affect everything in our lives. So we can be cultivating sattva, or we can cultivate tamas. And when we find an underlying motive in our behavior, we can change it. This is another place that the practices have a tremendous effect. Our energy grows or increases in the direction that we pointed. So whether it's Agnihotra or your divine dinacharya, or your daily meditation, or just a stroll with a friend, or taking your dog on a walk, let your practices be grounded in the path that's increasing sattva in your life. Okay. I think that's it. So we have some questions.
Okay, we had a couple of questions asking, how often does Agnihotra need to be practiced? Let's say in a home garden space for it to be beneficial.
Okay. Well, the idea is to practice it daily. And so, the people often ask the question, but what if I miss? So if you miss, you miss. If you practice it more regularly, you'll get greater benefit. If you practice it as much as you can, this is a good start. What happens is it will draw you there. In other words, you won't want to miss it, and you can start to schedule things around it more often. But if you miss, you miss. you'll see how you feel. But it doesn't mean, and how quickly do you feel the effects? Moment by moment. Yeah, right away. And the home will start to change. And the frequency with which you practice will make a difference as to how quickly those changes will come. It can be practiced in the home. When you first start out, and we're happy to teach anyone who wants to learn with no charge. But sometimes it gets a little smoky and stuff at first because you're trying to get the hang of it if you're not used to working with fire. But it doesn't take much, and once you get practice, then there's very little to no smoke, and what the smoke that does come is incredibly healing. You can breathe it; it'll go right in your face and your eyes, and it doesn't hurt like regular smoke. Yeah, so I suggest to get started.
Do you have any thoughts on cultural appropriation when using practices from a spiritual tradition or culture that is not native to where one was born or lives? How can one be authentic and respectful in these times where it seems everything gets diluted or mass marketed?
Okay. Well, I think that I'll just use Agnihotra as the example. I think there are some people who practice Agnihotra and they kind of do it whenever they want. And so if they like what they get, it's okay. In terms of respecting it, I think it's very important, and who teaches you, will tell you what's really important. And so it's not so much about Agnihotra, in this case, is not so much about a culture. It's meant to be practiced all over the world. There was a great man, Sri Vasant Pranjape, who was sent by Sri Gajanan, that I mentioned, around the world to introduce Agnihotra. And that's why there are people practicing it in South America, in Europe, and in the US, and not just in India. This is something that thousands of people are practicing because it aligns us with nature. So it's not specific to a culture, but does it have very specific details to the practice? And it does, and it's because it's science. Just like Ayurveda, it's science. It's based in nature. So we should respect it. But it really comes back to your direct experience. It's cause and effect. If you like the results, then do it or do more of it. And if you don't, then don't. Do you see? Hopefully that makes sense. So diluting it would be things like not respecting the use of copper in this case, understanding that it needs to be done with cow dung. And why you're making those offerings of ghee and rice, because they do come together and create something that is quite medicinal.
Is Rajas the doorway to Sattva?
Well, yes, Rajas is activity, and it's a matter of right kind and right amount. So yeah, it would be a rare, if ever, occasion that we jump from tamas directly to sattva, because we need the action. There's got to be some action. Perhaps, anything is possible in nature, so I wouldn't say never. But yes, rajas, activity, but again, right kind, right amount. In other words, point yourself in the right direction, and you'll move into sattva. Mm-hmm. And you also need to have the intention. If you just think about the activity and you're not thinking about creating more balance and harmony in yourself, you're probably going to get stuck in the rajas.
How can we be grateful when we have pain?
Well, pain is a great teacher. I've had plenty of that in terms of body pain. I've had plenty of that in my life, and mental pain as well. When we understand, think about it this way. If you think about prana, life force, and that it's by its nature it moves, energy moves by its nature. It's only when it's inhibited from moving that it creates problems. And that's part of how pain comes about. You know, vata is responsible for most, is a player in pain in the body and in the mind, actually. And so so how we be grateful is that we come back to who we truly are as eternal spirit, and realize that this too can pass, and it will. Yeah. So something that connects you to your higher self, something that connects you to nature. Yeah. And making a list of all the good things in your life, because we always have some good things there. Yeah. And focusing on that. Okay.
We can finish with the mantra.
Okay. Did you go to Facebook too? I didn't look.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, let's finish up with the mantra then. Yeah. Let's do the Jaya mantra for healing. Right? Om Triambakaya Jamahe Sugandim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityor Mukshiyamamritat. Good. May you have great healing. A beautiful day. Namaste.